Hey there, my name's Brashler, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up your Behringer wing with Wave SuperRack Performer on the USB interface and utilizing the external routing inside of the effects rack of the Behringer wing for the best insert possibilities with your wing. Now, if you're brand new to my channel, I'm all about helping you feel more confident with your production gear no matter where you're starting from. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, with the Behringer wing, there is a 48 by 48 USB interface on the back of the wing, and you can just interface that with one of the printer style USB-B cables into your computer with Wave SuperRack Performer. So I have that style cable going into my USB-C on my MacBook Air here that I have. Now, a couple things to note is when we go into our setup, we want to make sure that our clock rate is set to the highest that it can go. So the Behringer wing can utilize both 48K or 44.1 kilohertz for the sample rate. I always suggest using 48K because it's going to give you the fastest latency on the throughput of your Behringer wing. Unless there's a very specific reason that you're using 44.1, I always suggest setting this to 48K. Now, once we have our computer plugged into our Behringer wing using the USB, and we have Wave SuperRack Performer open, we need to do a couple of things. We need to first go into Setup, go to our device, and go and select Wing. Now, once we do that, that's going to automatically pull down the sample rate that our Behringer wing is utilizing. And then we have our buffer size. Now, our buffer size is important because the higher this number, the longer the buffer or the longer the latency. However, the benefit of using a longer buffer or bigger buffer is that the processor task is less. Now, if you go with a smaller buffer size, the latency is going to be faster, which is going to be a better situation for your musicians, especially if they're using in-ears and you're wanting to put this into their in-ears. Now, the downside of having a fast buffer or the lower number in our buffer size is that it takes up more processor CPU usage on your computer. Now, if you happen to have a fast computer, you can get away with getting into the 32, 64, or 96. Now, if you have an older computer, I suggest upgrading so you can get to that faster latency. However, you might be needing to select 256 or 512, depending on that. Now, because I'm doing a screen recording on this computer as well, I'm going to go ahead and select 256. Now, once we have that, we want to go to Overview. Now, we can see that we have our racks here, and none of them are routed. So there's a few things that I want to do. First off, I have this microphone plugged into my channel 1, and then I also have a stereo channel on channel 2. Now, we can utilize the internal effects rack inside of the Behringer wing for being able to insert our Wave SuperRack Performer on a channel. Now, the other way of doing this is just routing our channel directly into our USB. So to do that, we could go to Outputs, go to our USB audio, and then here we can go and find our channel. So if I go and route my local microphone here, we can have this go into Wave SuperRack Performer. And so if I was to go select Input, Mono, Wing, and Input 1, we could see that this microphone is now going into my Wave SuperRack Performer. And then what we could do is we could then go to my channel and route it from the USB, and that would be a full insert for waves on this microphone. Now, the downside of doing this is I have no way of undoing this mid-show. I'd have to go and completely change the routing for this to happen. So inside of the Behringer wing in our effects rack, we can actually go and select an external, and we can route via the external effects rack to Wave SuperRack Performer and have that inserted on our channel. Now, to do this, we can go to our effects and then press any of the open ones with the plus, go to external. So now I have these two selected on effects 13 and effects 14. Now, we actually need to route this and insert this on the physical channel. So I'm going to go select my channel 1 here, and I'm going to go to my first insert point, and I'm going to go and select my effects processor 13. Now, at this point, I can press on, and we need to send the audio from this channel to waves. So to do this, we can go and select send, and then on our output here, we have our USB audio, local 1, and we want to change that. So we want to have our source group be effects send, and this is going to come from effects send 13. Now, it doesn't matter which side you select because this is a mono channel, but the way that the effects rack treats it is it splits that mono into 2 stereo outs. But because there's no mono panning for stereo, it doesn't actually matter. So at this point, we have this channel going to my waves. So we can see that wing mono 1 is routed here. But if I go and tap this, and I turn this up, it's not actually going through to my left-right fader. We can't actually hear this, and that's because we haven't routed the output from waves back into our effects rack that we have. So I'm going to go back to effects rack 13 here, and then I'm going to go select my return. So I'm going to go open this up and go to my USB audio, and then I'm going to select my USB 1. Now, I have this already configured as a stereo, so I do need to undo that real quick. So what I'm going to do is go to routing and go to my sources, go to USB audio, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to initialize, and I'm also going to initialize number 2. So we can see that the audio is coming back from waves, but we just need to route this. So go back to effects, open this up, and we are going to select USB 1. And so at this point, we can hear this tapping. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. And so what I'm able to do with this is I can go in and uninsert waves directly by just pressing on and off on my insert point on this channel, which is very useful. Another thing that we could do is we could make a snapshot or a snippet that removes our inserts on our channels just in case waves happens to have an issue with your computer. Maybe your computer crashes. You can set up a snippet to be able to remove your inserts, which is a very beneficial thing because then you wouldn't have much downtime. So we can see that this is working. And if I go into my waves and I mute this rack, we can see that I don't have any output. And this is a perfect way of being able to test whether or not you have audio actually passing through waves back to your wing. And so if I was to go insert a plugin on here, I could just go and select really anything that I want to. So for instance, we could go do a pitch shift. And so we can double click open into this and turn this to 0 speed on this. And we have this working as autotune. Ooh. So that's as simple as it is for utilizing the effects rack. Now, what happens if we have a stereo source? Well, we need to do a little bit more configuration to get that stereo source working with Wave SuperRack Performer. And so I have this guitar that is stereo. Ooh, that was a sour note. So we can see that this is coming in from AES50C 1 and 2. Now this is stereo. So we need to do a little bit of configuration with our sends to Wave SuperRack Performer. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my insert and I'm going to select my next effects processor, which is 14. Now, once I have this set, I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. And so at this point, I'm not getting any audio through. There we go. And so I want to set up the send for my channel. Now I'm going to go ahead and set up the sends for this external effects type. So we're going to click into sends, and on 3 and 4 is what I'm going to be utilizing for this effects send. So I'm going to go ahead and unlock, press +1 auto, and I'm going to go and select effects send 14 left and effects send 14 right. Now we can see that those are coming out of USB audio 3 and 4. And so at this point, we can go over to Wave SuperRack Performer and route this. So we can see on rack 2, I'm going to call this electric guitar. And we can pull it in on a stereo from the wing. And we are going to be pulling this in on 3 and 4. So we can now see that we have audio coming in, and our audio is routing out to our USB on 3 and 4. Now we need to do a little bit of configuration in the routing page on sources inside of our Behringer wing at this point. So go to routing, go to your sources, and we want to pull up USB audio. Now on USB 3 and 4, we need to configure this as a stereo setup. because this is a stereo return coming into our console. So to do this, all we have to do is press stereo. And so we can now see that USB 3 and 4 are linked as a stereo pair. And so at this point, we can go back to our effects rack on 14, select our return, and we can select USB 3 and 4 as a stereo and press close. And at this point, we now have our audio coming back from Waves into our console. And we can go verify this by going over to our Wave SuperRack Performer and pressing mute and pressing unmute. Now at this point, we can go into Wave SuperRack Performer and set up a dynamics processor, for instance. So let's go ahead and pull up the CLA3A, which is one of my favorites for guitars. And let's listen to this. There we go. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you. If you do happen to have any questions, or there's a video that you're hoping that I would make on the Behringer Wing or Waves or really any other production equipment that's out there, please post that in the comment section down below, as I'm always reading through those comments to find videos that are going to be helpful for you. If you haven't already, make sure to check out my website at drewbrashler.com. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.